Next up on my tiny bench is this Adcom GCD600. It is a 5-disc CD changer, carousel style. It uses the TDA 1541 DAC chip, so it's highly sought after, at least that DAC chip is. This unit comes to us with the symptom of one of the output channels, the analog output channels, is not working, the left channel specifically. Now, the way the analog channels work on these Adcoms, there is a fixed output and then a variable output. The problem apparently is with the fixed output, left channel, no output. Variable output has a volume that's controlled by the remote only, and apparently both left and right work on the fixed output, or excuse me, on the variable output, but not on the fixed output. It also has a digital output, and apparently that's fine too. So chances are we've either got a bad relay near the output or a bad op amp. It uses different op amps for the fixed output than for the variable output. So next we'll take a quick look at the back, and we'll be right back for that. Back on my tiny bench with the Adcom GCD600. As I mentioned last time, there are really 3 outputs, or sets of outputs, however you want to look at it. There is the fixed here, variable here, and then a digital output, coax output here. The problem, once again, we're told, is that this left fixed has no output, but the left variable has output. So next up, we will take a look and verify that that in fact is the symptom as described. We'll just confirm that. I will note that this is the 600, which is made in Japan. Adcom made a very similar unit after this, the GCD700, which is made in China. Draw your own conclusions. Back on my tiny bench with the Adcom GCD600, kind of want to do a quick walkthrough of the interior structure. It is a 5 CD in a carousel format. The carousel slides in like this, advances such that the mechanism can recognize the number of discs, and then it reports back how many discs there are and takes it from there. The CD laser itself down in here, it uses the KSS 240, I believe, which is still commonly available. This is the processor chip, which is a Denon processor chip. I'm told that Denon actually built this for Adcom, but I'm not 100% sure. And several op amps. These are labeled as Adcom AA6, but I believe AD made those for Adcom. And here you can see the DAC chip. It's the Philips TDA 1541A. Definitely produces a nice sound. And a couple of Sony processor chips in here. And then these are the output relays. As you saw from the rear, this is the fixed, this is the variable, and then there's a digital output as well. a series of fuses over here for the interior AC, interior DC. If you ever get one with no power, that's the first place to look. And to work on the board itself, you'll need to remove the back panel, and then there's a series of these cables which disconnect directly from the board. So a little tedious, but certainly better than having to unsolder a bunch of connections. This is a test strip over here, and as you're looking at for RF output and that sort of thing, one of these posts is labeled as RF. There's also ground over here. Certainly you'd want to use a 10 times probe or higher so you don't load that down, causing unpredictable results. So as I say, with the reported problem of nothing out the left channel fixed, but something out the right channel fixed, it would lead me to conclude that it's possibly this relay here, or the appropriate op amp, and each channel has its own op amp. More later. Back on my tiny bench with the Adcom GCD600, which had reports of no left channel output on the fixed output side. We were unable to duplicate that, but we did notice that the drive is pretty picky, pretty selective about when it will decide to play a disc and when it won't. And it doesn't seem to have anything to do with which of the 5 slots of the carousel that it's in, or which disc it is. Really nothing other than sometimes it'll play a disc and sometimes it won't. Now when it plays it, we've taken a look at the eye pattern, the RF output of the mechanism itself, and this laser, and it looks strong when it plays. That might suggest a problem with the focus. Now, the fact that we've got a good RF makes me think that the tracking is probably fine, because, I mean, that's just rock solid when it's working. So if it is a problem with the focus, really it could be a couple of different things. It could be still within the laser itself, and it might be worthwhile to try to replace that. I've got one on hand. This, as I said earlier, is the KSS240. I usually get those from Liberty Electronics through eBay, and they've been just a great company to work with, never let me down. So it could be that, or it could be in this feedback loop here. Feedback loop is probably not the best way to put it, but this is the little network that controls focus and tracking and sends information back to the coils to determine if the mechanism should move or not. And looking at it in the service manual, genuine paper service manual, how nice. Talking about this section here. And as you'll see, information is fed through here to determine if the laser needs to change track, change focus, or if it's right on where it needs to be. Goes through each of those sections, goes through an op amp, and then through this transistor pairing, a complementary pair, and then it sends information to the pickup unit itself, and whether it's changing focus, changing track, what have you. Now, as I mentioned, it could still be within the unit itself. Could be something honky with the tracking coil or with the focus coil, or even the RF amp that's built right in, or one of the detector diodes, which determines if we're off course or on course. So next steps, and as you'll see, I've got the carousel pulled out just to allow access, because when this is in place and it's playing, really difficult to get to any of these components. So what I'll do next, as best I can reach them, I'll just static check those 6 transistors that we just looked at. Let's just see what they're doing. If anything's suspicious, then we'll address that. Probably after that, assuming that everything's fine there, I probably will just swap out that laser, if for no other reason, just to eliminate it as a possibility. Easy enough to swap out. Pull off the bottom, pull off the back. This mechanism, this whole carousel kind of comes out in the back, and then you can have access to it. This is one of the lasers that does not ship with the solder blob, the static protection solder blob. So that's one less thing to worry about, and I will wear my static wrist guard when I get to that point. But for now, the next steps will be, as I say, static check these transistors. Let's see if there's anything there that just jumps out as obviously wrong. And after that, I may pull this board out and just do an in-circuit test of these capacitors. Unit's probably from 95, so I know these caps don't see, a lot of hard work. It isn't like they've got big inrush current or that they've got to feed a bunch downstream. But nonetheless, capacitors get old, they get overheated, the dielectric dries up, any number of things could happen. So while I've got it on the bench, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at those. The belts, this one's a little loose. I may try and swap that out. This one looks fine. And those will be the next step. Static, laser, capacitors, belt. And report more later. Thank you. Back on my tiny bench with the Adcom GCD600 CD changer, and I'm showing the RF pattern. Here we see it's in the between tracks on the test track where it's doing the countdown. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now it should catch. And what I want to illustrate here is the nice pattern in the middle, that eye right there. And you see that we're on a 10 times probe, 20 millivolts, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got a full volt peak to peak. Looks good. Bring you up and show you our signal out, both left and right. Recall that the symptom was described as no output on the left. Fixed, that is the left and right fixed. So you can see that those are both coming out nice. Nice clean signal, 500 hertz. And we're changing again. Now we're up to track 28, again on one of my favorite discs for this purpose, the test disc. I don't know how you say his name. Pierre. Let's just call it Pierre. And what we're looking for here is to see where the dropouts occur. This is the disc that has the large gaps on it. 27 is the standard. So as we get into 28, we're looking at larger gaps than standard. And 28's playing fine. 29's playing fine. What we'll do here is we'll get to the point where it's not playing fine, where we see some kind of glitching, and that's when we know we've gone one gap too far. 29's playing fine. I like to give it about 15 seconds or so just to make sure that it isn't going to glitch after it starts up. 30. Looks to be playing fine as well. 31. 32. 33. 34. 35. Nope. Let's just verify 34 worked. So it'll play 34, but not 35. We consult our list here. We see that 34, not sure if the camera can pick that up. 34 represents a 2 millimeter gap. 35 would have been a 2.4 millimeter gap. So it will play 2 millimeter gap, not 2.4. Since we were last here, what we've done on my tiny bench, we verified that all of those transistors appear to be fine, and those transistors were in this path here. This deals with tracking, this deals with focus. Those are the two that really matter. This is more of a sled, but sometimes if the sled's jittery, that can cause problems as well. So all 6 of these transistors appear to be fine. Also took a look at the signal coming out of here and coming out of here, and certainly seemed responsive. I also replaced the laser drive, and that seems to have done the trick. We'll test it for a day or so. I may do some additional testing in the next video, but for now, I think we've got this Adcom GCD600 working pretty well. It does take a second to spin this disc up rather, but I mean, that wasn't too bad for 99 tracks, and it is a recorded track from another test disc that I own. Particularly recorded it because I wanted to use the CDR to check the play of CD players. Let's just move forward and see how fast it spins up on a commercially pressed disc. Nice. More later. That's it for now from my tiny bench. Back on my tiny bench with the Adcom GCD600. Just wanted to do a brief video to explain the process for replacing the laser. The first thing is the back panel needs to be removed. In order to remove the back panel, there's a screw here that needs to be removed, and then the screws that have the associated fittings behind them, RCA jacks, digital, and remote, those need to be removed. Then on the bottom, there's a series of 3 screws that will need to be removed as well. Once those are removed, it sort of pries off if you can see here, that hole lines up with a little nib of sorts right there. And what you do is kind of rock it out and then pry it up. After you've accomplished that, there is, you now have access to the housing where the laser lives. You can see the back of the laser board right there. And basically, what you'll do then is you'll remove this screw and washer. And then this rocks up. And there's a similar rod on this side, but that just slides into a receiving hole. So once you take this off, you rock this up gently and then bring it out slowly. You'll have to disconnect two cables. And they are this cable, which you can disconnect from either side. Ultimately, you're going to need to disconnect it from this side anyway, because the replacement laser will have the receptacle to receive that cable. So I recommend disconnecting it from this side. And then this cable here. This cable, however, stays with the mechanism and does not directly attach to the replacement laser. So best just to pull that off from here. Once that unit is removed, what you'll see is there is a rod, and I'm not going to pull it back out again because just got it working pretty nicely. I'll try and reposition it, see if I can show the rod I'm referring to. It's right here. There is a rod, and right there is the side of the unit itself. So the laser unit moves on that rod. Once you have this removed, in the back of, or the far end of that rod is a screw that you'll pull off, and then the rod can pivot out. And once you have the rod pivoted out, the laser itself can easily be removed. The laser I'm referring to looks like this. And you'll see there's a hole and there's a hole. That silver rod that I just showed you, that would go right there. There's a gear here, or there's a set of teeth here. A gear attaches to that. And that's what allows this unit to move forward and back as it tracks the CD. Goes without saying that highly susceptible, so make sure you're wearing a static wristband. Make sure that no harm comes to the laser. And that is the process for replacing a laser on a GCD600. There are 3 potentiometers right here. Those are set by the factory, and best bet when you put a new laser in is to leave those as they are set. Again, I get these from Liberty, the eBay seller. I've never had any trouble. They're very nice people to deal with. They ship out of Miami, so not waiting weeks and weeks. And that is it for now from my tiny bench on how to replace a laser on this GCD600. More later. We are back on my tiny bench with the Adcom GCD600 5-disc carousel player. And we've changed the laser. We've verified that all of the systems are working fine. We've got output on both channels. And you know what that means. It's now time to listen to some royalty-free music, because royalty-free music is the best music. Thank you for watching My Tiny Bench. That wraps up this episode. Thanks again.